Hi everybody, welcome to another video series here. I just thought I'd do another one. I enjoyed doing the first one, although it was a little nerve-wracking just because I'd never done it before, I suppose. And I don't know. Honestly, I don't even know. Uh, don't know how far I'll get with this one, but I thought I'd give it a shot doing a second one. It's fun having a record of these things. And anyway, I have some guitar parts that I recorded here, as you were just listening to some of it there. This is where I usually start from most of the time with guitar parts. Sometimes I start with other things, piano or synthesizer or something else, but even bass. Sometimes I start with a bass guitar, a bass line or something, but most of the time, I would say probably 90% of the time, maybe 80-90% of the time, I start with guitar parts. And so, as I was just doing there, I recorded these yesterday, so I'm going to give it a run through and just listen what we got here. All right, interesting. It's a little bizarre. Some of these and this particular section right here, I remember thinking, okay, this is a little out there, but I don't know. I like things that are new to me, I guess, for lack of a better way of putting it. As with anything you do, you can get kind of stuck in a rut doing the same thing, I think, or similar things. And, you know, honestly, like I don't know if I mentioned this before, but, I've been playing guitar for 40 years now. I got my first electric guitar anyway when I was 12. I think I might have had an acoustic before that maybe, but I don't know that I even really played it much. But at some point when I was 12, I got the bug, and I remember asking my grandfather if I could have an electric guitar, and he took me down to a local music store in Ohio, where I lived in Northeast Ohio, and bought me one. And I remember just, all right, that was pretty great stuff. And so, I'm 52 now, and I've been doing this for 40 years. And in the course of that time, I've played a lot of music. And full disclosure, I just recently, although I have studied it in the past in varying degrees, I really just recently, within the last, I don't know exactly when it was, but within recent years, let's just say, I really started diving more into music theory, which I had some understanding of, as I said. When I was, gosh, I don't know, about 18 or so, I started getting into like the pentatonic scale and the major and minor scale. I formed a basic understanding of those things, let's say. I mean, really, maybe it was more than basic. I basically learned those scales in all the positions, on the neck, the major and minor pentatonic scales, and the major and minor scale, which are basically the same scale, just how you apply it. I learned in all the positions, so I had that and a pretty good understanding of that in terms of like I had a decent understanding of it, let's say. But I've learned more about it in recent years, and it's interesting. I mean, it's great in a lot of ways. It's a great thing to a great tool to have in your toolbox, let's say. But there's something, and maybe part of it is that I didn't really know much of theory for a long time. I wasn't trained classically or anything young. I took some classical guitar lessons again around the my early 20s, maybe, or somewhere around in there. But I didn't follow through with it. And what I'm trying to say, I guess, in this long roundabout way, is that I think because I had a lot of that unconventional kind of approach, I guess you would say, to writing and whatnot. And I don't know if that's all of that. I think that had an influence on me, but also just that I don't know. I like things that are different. I like things that are new. I find excitement in that. And so like this section here, this is a long roundabout way of explaining this particular section, which I've just highlighted here, was something that was just off the cuff, and I wasn't even really thinking about anything kind of in the realm of theory, like what chords are these. I was thinking of the shapes and the the rhythm, I suppose, of it, and how it sounded when I played it. And this is what I came up with here. It was this little part that just it's certainly strange, and I suppose I could dig into it and figure out what chords I'm playing there, but it would take some digging because these are some strange shapes I was doing there. They're basically triads, I can tell you that much. Let me think. It's like a triad. It's almost like a boy, I don't know what that would be. They're triads that start on the low E string and just go straight across, like in a bar form. So they go across the E, A, and D strings, and that little inflection there is basically like adding a flatted fifth to them. That little diddle 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 sort of thing is adding a flatted fifth to that triad. Now, what if any chord is that? I mean, without the flatted fifth, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what shape that is. Honestly, it's just a straight bar across E, A, and D strings, in different positions. And I can't think. I know I could figure it out, but I can't think offhand what chord that would be. It's almost like it's close to a minor seventh, but it doesn't have the fifth in there. It's got a 1. It's got a 1, a 4, and a minor seventh. It's got no third. So it's not a major or a minor because it doesn't have a third, which is what determines major or minor. But it's strange. It's now those last two on each there's like I see it kind of like two sections of 5, two sections of 5 chords. And the last two on each section, I believe, were on the A, D, and G string. The same shape, but on the A, D, and G string, just for that slightly higher sound. And then there's this section, which is just got some... The first part I recorded was this top part, I believe, yeah. And that's just like a form of tapping. It's tapping an octave above what I'm playing with my left hand, with my right hand, and getting harmonics out of notes that... Again, these aren't really... I just see them as a shape. They're not necessarily in a key. I don't know. I suppose they could be. But anyway, yeah, and it just created that kind of strange sound. And then I did a little noodling on the other... on this guitar. See, these two guitars here are panned left. It says guitar L, guitar right. So the first one I did was the left side, and then I did some noodling on the right side. These two sections here. The top one is the left side, the bottom one's the right, and sound like this. And strangely, I notice here in the playback that everything's reversed. I don't know if that was the case in my previous video, but I just noticed that the stereo field is inverted here somehow. It's not that big a deal. What I've got coming out the right side is coming out the left. Like if I solo this. Okay, no it isn't. Did I take it back? Let's see. No, it's not. I don't know what I was thinking there. Just hearing it wrong, I guess. Anyway, as I ramble on here. So as I did in the previous video, you know, and I think I mentioned, you know, a lot of my process is listening and just kind of, at the risk of sounding a little, I don't know, artsy-fartsy or something, I do kind of just let the music speak to me, you know, try and let it speak to me in the sense that I try to get a feel for, you know, where do I think it should go by listening to it, by listening to what I've created here, you know, this basic building blocks, I suppose you could call it, of the song. So, you know, this first part, my first impression was this first block here, all could be by itself, you know, could just stand by itself. Sometimes I feel like that gets a little boring if it goes on too long or something. But let's hear it again. Let me see what my impression is. Yeah, I really like this sound. It's just kind of big. I don't know how to describe it. Big, blown out, you know, just kind of almost sounds like if you were playing through an amp, like the amp's about ready to explode or something, you know. But at the same time, it's not like it's almost more like in the fuzz realm in the term of the distortion, and as opposed to something like, you know, heavy metal with a real tight focused kind of distortion. There's something just kind of loose and, you know, a little explosive sounding I enjoy here. The only problem with this now, and I think I mentioned this before, here's my here's what's called the Pro. By the way, this whole software that I use, just as a little aside here, which was $500 just a few months ago, just for this, you know, this DAW software, digital audio workstation recording software, has just been made completely free. The company that owned it is having financial problems and they stopped production of it, so another company bought it and made it free. If anybody's interested, if anybody even watches these videos, I don't know. Anyway, like I was saying, if I click on this track here, which is the track that has that audio we just listened to, that guitar, it brings this thing up, which is called the Pro channel. I think I struggled to remember what this is called in the previous video, but it's called the Pro channel. And what it is it's like there's one of these for each track here. Like if I went to the next track, you can see the name change down here. If I went to this drum track, see now there's a channel for that, and all the these are called modules. They call these modules that are included here are for each track. See, as I go through these tracks, you can see the name changes down here. And even if I went to the master track, there's a couple things. Well, actually, there's just one thing here right now. You can add more, as I showed in my previous video. You can add modules to this by right-clicking, going to Insert Module, and there's this whole list of modules here. But any case, the things that are preset right now onto these tracks, not the master. You saw the master just had the EQ on it, but onto your the tracks that you're actually putting music on is what's here. And one thing I use is the EQ, and you can see this is called flying it out, making it bigger. You can see this has already got a cut in the low end, around 100 hertz. it's basically a high pass, and it's cutting off the low frequencies. This area is the low frequencies. Of course, this is the middle frequencies, and this area up here is the high frequencies. So when you have something like this, watch, I'll take it off. See, now everything would be flat. So that would be meaning that what you're hearing is simply the representation of what you recorded. It's not being affected by the EQ at all. Anytime you raise this white line, anytime you raise it up, you're increasing that frequency within the sound. And it goes from 20 hertz up to 20,000 kilohertz, or 20 kilohertz. Which is, I believe that's 20,000 hertz. Is that how that? I think that's how it works. Any case, so with what I did here is by putting that line on a curve like that, it's taking out a lot of the really low frequencies from the sound. However, once again, kind of a long roundabout way. Even having said that, it's still a very kind of low-endy sound, especially when you get the two tracks like are on, like start here. When you get two of these going, it becomes very low-endy, and that's one thing I was aware of when I was recording it. But I thought, I'll do my best to deal with it because I like this sound. I mean, once you start adding bass drum and bass guitar into this, you could end up with a mud puddle if you're not careful. It could. Just because of how much low end. Just listen to just a little of this when there's two guitars in, how much low end information is there. It's a lot. It may not even sound like a lot there, but it's more than maybe I'd normally use, at least, just because of the sound I used. And the sound I used came off this thing, which I think I touched on. This is not the sound that I used. In fact, I don't even remember it. Honestly, there's a list of them over here. It was something on here, and I don't remember honestly what it was. I'd have to search through here. What I should have done is I should have. I very rarely do this, but you can come over here to the Pro Channel area, and where is it? Yeah, if you click on this track button up here, you can type in here, and I could have listed which patch I used on this plugin, which is basically the software for my physical interface that I plug everything into. It has this, it's basically kind of like a rack-mounted guitar effects unit, and it's also happens to double as the interface for software, for recording software like this, But anyway, so that's just something I know I have to be aware of. And I don't necessarily have to deal with it now. I can deal with it in the mixing phase, later on. And that's probably what it'll do, because I'll want to get an idea. I want to hear what's happening once other things are added. And if at some point I notice, oh boy, that's turning into a mud puddle, it's getting too much low-end information, I'll have to do something. Maybe make more of a cut in the EQ over here, like I could use this one here. I'll look at the spectrum analyzer. Well, here. You can see that there's still a lot of low-end information right in here. That's getting a peak there. So maybe I would do something like this, But for now, I'm just going to leave it. You can see that's still peaking down here around 150 hertz. It's getting that big mountain in it right there. This is all gone. Now watch, if I bring this out, a little of that came back, but again, with that on, it's really trimming down that bottom end of it anyway. Okay, anyway, having said that, I was kind of talking over the roar there, but yeah, so this first part, I do kind of like it just by itself. So here's something I often do. I think I talked about stretching and shrinking this stuff. This is just for editing purposes. It doesn't alter. These are the visual representations of the waveform of the recorded audio. These blocks, and you can expand them this way, and you can, squish them or stretch them this way. And it doesn't change the audio in any way. All it does is makes it easier to work with. Like for instance, I can shrink this down. I can right click and hold and highlight all these sections which are other than this, like what I'm thinking of as the intro part. Then I just left click and hold and I can drag them down here. So now, like what I was thinking is, I'll expand it again. So those kind of go off screen here when I expand it. See, they're still there. They're just going off screen. I almost think that I might want to do this part again. So I can just copy and drag that over. So now we've got that part repeating here. And maybe when it starts repeating, maybe something else will come in. Maybe some, I don't know, some symbols or something. But let's listen to this. Let's see something here. I think I'm getting some, as I was before, getting a little bit of latency here. But yeah, I can see that. Yeah, I'm almost thinking of just like some tinkling cymbals in here. As I previously explained, I'm adding notes here to the drum software, which is on this track. You can see it's being added up here too. And this is called the piano roll. And just by clicking, I'm adding these notes in, which are different triggers to drum samples. That's a closed hi-hat sound. I don't know if you can hear that. That's a ride cymbal sound. So by adding these notes in here, it's adding it to the song here. And I think I showed this before, but I'll show it again. This is the drum software, and you get this is kind of cool. I mean, you get a visual representation of what's happening, and by these little highlights that pop up as stuff plays. It's all between the hi-hat and this ride cymbal, if you can see that. It's like if you hit the bass drum, even on here, if you click on it, it makes it look like something's happening there, you know. Or the toms, the snare, which is kind of hidden there, but any of these kit pieces. So that's what's going on there when I'm adding these notes in here, these little green, well, I don't know what to call those really, but these little green rectangles, I guess. Pretty rectangular. And so see, that's something I could repeat that. And if I want to repeat that section that I just wrote, I can highlight it up here, hold control and hold left click and just drag it over. And now it's going to repeat. Watch. Yeah, that's kind of interesting, but maybe something else on this next part. Let's see. see what that sounds like. Where's... Okay, right here. Now I know that this particular sound, which is like just another ride cymbal, more of a bell sound, a little more aggressive bell sound, it's often a little too loud for my taste if I just leave it at its stock volume. So I'm going to go down here, and by doing that, I just brought up this area here. These are the velocities of these individual notes that I just put in. I just brought them down a little bit. Let's hear where they are now. Yeah, that's alright for now. If I need to change it later, I will. Let's listen to the whole thing from the start again. Yeah, that's working, I think. Some atmosphere there. Some like fast hi-hat like flurries here. I think that's fairly fast, let's say. Wow. it's not crazy fast, but it's a slow tempo song. It's only a 64 BPM song, so these are actually, like when I put these three in a group here, I'll highlight them here. Those three notes, those are actually 30-second notes, which are pretty fast notes in terms of just the general speed at which, 30-second notes are pretty high in the hierarchy of note values. Let's put it that way in terms of how fast. But being that the tempo is so slow, they're really not that fast in this case. Just that's nothing. It's almost like like an eighth note in a or something in a faster tempo. What would be almost like an eighth note or something in a faster tempo. But anyway, let me hear this one more time. Let me see. I think I'd like to put a yeah, that cymbal right on the end. Let's see what that sounds like. I don't know if that's a China, what that is, but it's got that certain different flavor to it. That last note I put on here, cymbal. Yeah, that's interesting. I had some interest, I think, to that. So now I'm going to save something I neglected to do in the previous video, like I normally do. I did mention the fact that I save frequently, usually when I'm doing these things, but I didn't really do it because I think I was so focused in just recording the video that I kind of neglected to do what I normally do, which is I frequently save. So almost to the point of paranoia of losing work, that I've done. So now I'm going to listen to this part again, and I know this can probably be boring, and I apologize, but again, it's my process, and I mentioned this before too, and I don't want to be overly redundant here, but in the old days when you wrote a song, the old days, because I'm an old person now, my experience with it anyway was, you would play these songs with your band if you were in a band, sometimes for, weeks, months, even a year or more, and the songs, you had all that time that you were practicing or, even playing live to, be refining the songs and, and in this, whatever you want to call this kind of modern era of songwriting, and of course that's still done. There's still bands and people working on music in that way. I'm sure. I'm not. I just happen to be doing this approach, which, is a much more faster. Is a much faster process, and so I don't feel too bad about doing a lot of listening when I'm doing this, because I figured, I would have heard this so much, this song so much in the old days. I would have heard it, who knows, hundreds of times probably, or something, as we rehearsed it, and maybe even played it live or whatever, so, I'll listen to this part again here. Yeah, I like that. I almost feel like they could use something else, I don't know, I'm thinking maybe like a synth part or something, just to spruce it up a little bit. Excuse me, a little yawn going on. Not sure though. I'm just taking a little sip of Gatorade there. Let's see. Let's hear it again. So, one thing I want to think about is, I'm almost thinking that like these last couple of parts of the tracks that we listened to earlier that I recorded are going to be probably like some kind of outro or something, and that the bulk of what I'll be working with is these parts that aren't highlighted here in this section. These parts right here. Here, I'll highlight those. And even let's come over to this section here, expand it a little. Even among those parts, like this part, and I'm talking about these parts. This part right here, this last little section, I'll highlight it and I'll loop it. I'm not sure. Let me listen to this again. For some reason, I'm not exactly sure why. As you can see visually represented here, I'll even make it bigger. That section that's highlighted is like half the length of these other ones that I did, and the section after it is also. That's not a big deal, but for whatever reason, I decided to, I could have just played that part twice as long, and it would have been the same as all these, But for whatever reason, I think I was thinking of it as like a turnaround, which is like, or a tag, like something that, I don't know, it could fit anywhere in a song really, but I would think of it as something like maybe coming out of the middle 8, like the break section. So maybe something like that, coming out of that, or who knows? It could be at the end of choruses, something that kind of, a little section that kind of leads you back into the verse or something. But let's listen. Let's think of maybe just these 3 parts. Let's listen to these real quick and see what impression we get of these. So you can really hear, like when it got to this middle section here, just because of I think the chords I was playing, I was adding in some low fifths, I think there, and you can really hear that bottom end thing I was talking about earlier really coming through there. A lot of low end information in that part just because of the chords I was using, but I don't know. My basic thought here is that I almost hear like verse, chorus, middle section with these three in that order, you know, verse, chorus, middle 8, or whatever here. So, although I'm a little torn just because I like this first part a lot, I almost think of that as like a possible verse. Although I only did a left side, I only did that one track. See, there's nothing on this track. So I've only got that coming out of one side. Let me hear this again. Yeah, I do kind of like that part, and I could hear. I'm just going to experiment here. I'm going to move this over. I copied and pasted another part, another copy of this part over here, and I'm going to try out a beat or two here from our beats section in our drum software. Rather than writing something myself, I'm just going to try and grab something here. Let's see. Now again, if I click this button here, that syncs the tempo of this software to our song, so we'll get a better idea of what this part will sound like if we put it in here. Much slower, as you can tell. Let's see what that sounds like. It's an interesting beat. So I went over here, and it's like, I'll give a brief explanation of this. This is the like a main category. It says heavy beat 05 contemporary 01. Gives you the tempo that it was originally recorded at and the category that they've put it in. And then these are subcategories of that. And like, for instance, hi-hat open, crash, hi-hat closed. So if you click on different ones here, you're going to get different variations of this beat, which are totally tweakable. You can move the notes around or add or subtract stuff. But I chose the hi-hat open. Let's hear what that sounds like. And all I did was I clicked on the hi-hat open here, left-clicked and held, and I dragged and dropped it in. I'll show you. I'll do it again. Watch. See, I added another one over there. We don't need that right now, so I'm just going to get rid of it. And you know what? I'm almost thinking that I might prefer a hi-hat closed, but let's hear what this sounds like. Actually, that sounds pretty cool. The only thing is just my personal musical taste, which is totally subjective. You know, I have a little bit of a, what would you call it? Kind of an aversion to open hi-hats that are too dominant sounding, you know. They're where the hi-hat, the open hi-hat within the drum sound itself can sometimes sound just overbearing, I guess, or something. I don't know. It's hard to say here. And again, as I mentioned in the first video, I'm not using, just for convenience sake, I'm using basically my gaming headset here, which has a boom mic built into it. So it's much easier to record my voice this way than setting up a microphone and doing it that way. And so these aren't the best monitoring headphones. I'll have to go back and actually monitor through headphones and studio monitors at some point to really fine-tune the sound here. But right now it's sounding like borderline to me. Like I could bring it down, but I don't know in terms of this open hi-hat part. Let's hear it again. Not horrible, but it's a little bit abrasive at the same time. And again, hard to tell on these headphones, but that's my impression with these headphones. I'm going to leave it for now. I'm not going to worry about it, and I kind of like that. My only problem here is that because I only recorded the left side, the one guitar part here, it feels somewhat unbalanced to me. Now, it can actually, I suppose, it can work in your favor in a way because you often heard it said that between one thing that helps distinguish, I suppose, and accentuate even the chorus of a song is if there's more energy, which often means more volume, frankly, within the chorus part. So transitioning from a verse into a chorus. So, being that all these other parts have, in fact, I'm going to separate these parts for now, because I'm pretty sure this part's going to be my outro part or something. But being that these parts all have the two guitars, left and right side, there'll definitely be more energy if we did that. It's just that, it often sounds kind of, I don't know how to put it really, but kind of unbalanced or something to me. If you all, if in this section, which would be the verse section of the song, I think, you just have, the guitar all, and it's panned. If you look at the console, if we go back to the console view here, and we look at this track, which is this track right here, guitar left, it's panned hard left, which means it's basically not coming out. I don't know if it's coming out of the right side. I don't think it is at all. Let me see. In fact, let me just listen on the headphones for a second. No, it actually is coming out of the right side still, which honestly is something I wasn't aware of, but it is. Yeah, it is coming out of the right side, so it doesn't like completely remove it from the, which is kind of strange in a way. Honestly, I would have expected it to be completely on the left, but anyway. So there is something coming out of the right side. It's just that there's nothing really wrong with that. And in fact, if you went to see a band live, I would say a lot of the time, it's closer to how they would sound live. Now I know that some bands will put, like guitar amps on both sides of the stage, and or be running it through the PA, which is you can mix it any way you want going through a PA. You can have the guitar coming out of both sides or whatever, but in just the basic sense of a band, in the kind of like I don't know, the old school version of it or something. If you saw a band, you would often hear, the drums would be in the middle, the guitar would be on whatever side the guitar is played on, the left or the right, and the bass player would be on the other side. So you would predominantly, like if you think of like I think the first Van Halen album, I think they did like some pretty hard panning on that, if I'm not mistaken. I haven't listened to that in a while, but I'm pretty sure that like the guitar is panned to one side and the bass is more or less panned to the other side, which is honestly, they don't do that too often. That I'm aware of, when they record stuff. Usually, the bass will be down the middle and the guitar is often on both sides. That's kind of I think, I don't know. They do that a lot, but there's a lot of variation within music and how things are done. So I don't know if you could say that's a hard and fast rule, but it seems like it's often done where the guitar is put in kind of a stereo left and right. In any case, when I hear this like this, I tend to think that it just sounds a little unbalanced for some reason to me, and I always think, gosh, there's so much less coming out of the right side. It's all coming out of the left side. Now, I could, take the Van Halen approach, if you will, and when I do the bass guitar, I could put that on the right, but I never do that. I don't know. I'm a down the middle bass guy for whatever reason. So I always end up thinking, if I do something like this, well, I really need something on the other side. Now, I showed a trick in my previous video where you can literally just copy a part and put it on, another track, and you get a stereo effect. The only thing is, as I said in that previous video, is it's not as, in my opinion, it doesn't sound as good as if you actually physically recorded the part again. Now that would be easy to do, to physically record it again, if I remembered or had notated, as I said earlier, which preset I used there, but I don't remember. And I would, you can see there's, I don't know, 100 or more presets here, and I don't remember which one I used. I would have to go through all of these and try to find it. So that's, I could try the technique that I was talking about. See, I just copy and paste this down, and then I do one more move here, which is I stretch this out to 1/28th note resolution. This is where you see the resolution here. And then I move one over, just one, that's like 128th note. I've moved that over. And what it does is it helps give it more of a stereo image. If you just keep it to where it's an exact copy of the first thing, and you just copy it down to another track, even if it's panned, and again, I showed this in my first video, it still has, it's closer, it really almost sounds mono, if not completely mono. It's just the nature of the fact that it's an identical part, I guess. You need some kind of little variations in there to really notice the stereo separation. And by moving, and this is an exact copy that I moved down here, but by moving it over just that little bit, 128th note, basically I moved the whole sound over like 128th note. It'll give it a little more stereo field when we listen to it. However, I do notice one. Let me just mute that second part. See, there it was just on the left by itself. And then here it is when I added this. Yeah, something's happening there. I think because of that move, even though it was just 128th note, you can hear that it's causing like a, I don't know what you call it, like a little stutter on that one change. Watch. If you haven't heard it already, here it is, right around here. See, that's not there, I don't think, in this first part by itself. It kind of is. There's a little rhythmic kind of chunking thing I did there. Listen, right here. Now listen with the second part in. It just sounds a little bit late, and it is. The second part is coming in. If we stretch this out even further, it's subtle. I mean, this is 64th note resolution here, but you can see how I think these are called transients. Here, I'll stretch. This will make it even more obvious. In these waveforms, stuff, just the visual representation of the recorded sound base, the sound wave, you can see how the peaks right here are happening right here. I'll have to turn this off to really get the peaks that are happening right here on this first track, this guitar left, you can see are happening right about here on the bottom track. So there's, that's that 128th note move that I made, and it's causing just that little bit of it sounds a little out of time, basically, is what it does. Watch one more time. Which, it's not a huge deal, and I was just reading an article recently about how, in our present day recording, so much is done to a click track anymore. If not, doing what I'm doing, which is literally everything is right on a grid. Especially when you think of the drums. The drums are, this is the visual representation of the MIDI notes, the piano roll. All these notes are right on a grid. So, I mean, in that sense, they're, I don't know what you'd want to call it, mechanical, almost robotic in that sense. If you saw, and a lot of these, and actually, these might not all be on a grid, because this is MIDI that was played by a drummer, supposedly. Although I have to say, these look like, if they're not, I doubt that this was actually, it was probably quantized, which is just a digital way of putting everything on a grid, even if it was played by a drummer, because these notes don't look like, they're all right on the grid. They're all starting right on the line, and there are a lot of parts in here. I don't know if I could find one for you quickly here, but there are a lot of parts in here that were played by drummers, and you can tell, I don't know if it's this particular pack or what's going on here, but you can tell. Let's find something else, like let's try one of these jazz things. Did I just see jazz? Okay. Let's just bring one of these in for a second. let's see if we look at this. Yeah, see, like this note right here? See how that note's not starting right on this line? That's an example of something that's not right on the grid. And this one, even this one's just a little bit off this one. Now that could be, a different note value, but it's literally starting like in the middle of those lines. And the point is that, and this is a jazz beat, so it's got a lot of cymbals in it. See how there's just subtly off the line, a little bit ahead there. Anyway, the argument that the article was making is that, because we have, this ability and whatnot in modern day to put everything on a grid, basically, that things, I don't know if it was really saying that things are better or worse, but just different. If nothing else, just different. He was pointing out how, he was actually, there's a function you can do in this software where you can bring in audio, and it will, like anything, a Beatles song. You could if you had a Beatles song, like the WAV file of a Beatles song, you could just drag it into this software, and the software will automatically make what's called a tempo map of it, and that is basically showing you how the tempo changes within the song. It'll show you a visual representation with a kind of a graph. And it was interesting. He had a bunch of famous songs that he dragged into this, and then he showed the graph. And a lot of these classic songs, like the Beatles song, and famous songs that you would know. And when you look at them in that sense, none of them were like on a grid like these notes, to where every note is falling right on a grid. The tempo would speed up and slow down, and speed up and slow down, in different parts of the song. Now, what was interesting and what he was commenting on about it was even the fact that it was speeding up and slowing down at points, it was like, how could I put it? There was a pattern to it. It wasn't just completely random, like, oh, they're speeding up here, they're slowing down there. I suppose maybe there was an element of that to it, but there was also an element of, like, they would slow down at certain points in the song, like maybe like right before the chorus. There would be just a little bit of a pause, and then they would come in with the chorus. And he was saying that things like that, and that would happen throughout the song anytime the chorus happened. So there was, it wasn't just completely random. There was some pattern to it. And he was actually, two different people were talking about this, and another guy was making a point that he thought that was, a big part of the emotion of the song, the fact that there was that, and it was brief. In this one example he was giving, it was just probably like a beat, or maybe even half of a beat within the song, where it just slowed down. They just kind of stopped the beat almost for just a microsecond, and then come back in. And it was just the argument he was making was just, it was kind of a human way of putting emphasis at that part of the song. And you can do that. You could literally do that within this software. You can do pretty much anything in this software. It'd be artificial in a sense, because nobody would be really physically playing that. Although I'm thinking primarily in terms of drums here, because of the drums that I use are, excuse me, they're not a live drummer, obviously, and you could put a pause if you wanted to in here, but the thing is that you would have to do that probably, I would think. You wouldn't have to, but you would probably want to do it before you recorded your guitar parts, because if you did it after the fact, that it wouldn't really be reflected in the guitar parts that I already have here, if I do it after the fact here, because I wasn't playing to that. I was playing to a click track, basically. I was playing to just a bare bones click track that sounds like this. That's what I recorded these guitar parts to, and sometimes I will start with a drum beat, actually, instead of a click track, just as something different, I'll either write a part or drag a part in, and but honestly, most of the time I start with a click track. But anyway, I have a tendency to get off on tangents here, but so anyway, again, that's and there's things you can do with quantization. I'll give you an example here. Let's go to like the middle of this where we see all these notes here, and I'll highlight them there. And you can probably see, I hope, that all these notes are falling on this grid behind it. I mean, I don't know how good it's going to show up in a video, but they're literally all starting right on a line, or just a hair fraction maybe, ahead of it. But you can do things with quantization. I'm not sure if that's the right word, but quantization, which is a way of moving the notes around, basically. What it's often used for is bringing notes that are not on the line onto the line, so that everything's like it is here, falling into a grid. But you can also do the opposite. I'll show you here. If I go to Process Effect, I bring up this quantize thing here. And, I'm not an expert with this, but I'll see if I can get this to do. I think I've done this before. Offset. Basically, what you can do is you can take something that's all on a grid like this and give it some variation to where the notes aren't falling all on the grid, which, in theory would make it sound more human, because a human being is not a machine and does not play every note right on the grid. I mean, there may be some people who are close, or even right on. I don't know. But generally speaking, and it's not just drummers, it's any musician. Anybody playing music is not going to be, right on a grid. That's just not how human beings work. So anyway, here, again, I'm not an expert with this because I don't use it that much, but let me see if I can get it to, this is an example here. I don't know if it's offset or random. Let's see. Let's see what happens if I just click enable here, if it moves them. Watch these notes down here. Yep, did you see that? It's subtle. I mean, look at this note is now starting way before that. So all it did was it put some randomization into these notes to where they're not all right onto the grid. And it's subtle. It's, you can adjust the amount of how much you want them. And this is subtle. Let's listen to it now. I don't even know if we'd be able to tell the difference, but... I noticed it, I think. Let me try turning this off. Just the one track. Yeah, I noticed it, and honestly, I don't know if I like it that much in this case. I'm going to undo that. Put them back on the grid. Listen now. Now they're back on the grid. Yeah, I actually prefer that, which is strange, but maybe it's because I've been doing this, so long that it's just my brain prefers the quantized version. Now, it's not always the case because, like I said, a lot of times when I drag in these beats from the drum program from here, a lot of times they're not right on the grid like this particular one is. I strongly suspect this was, maybe it was played by a real drummer, but then I think it was probably quantized because you just don't see them this locked to the grid very often, if ever. But anyway, yeah. And I've noticed of myself, and I don't know if this is a good or bad thing, but again, full disclosure, I've noticed that whether it's the drum part or a part that I play, guitar, bass, or even singing, I tend to lean towards wanting things to be in time and as close to being on the grid as possible. I don't know why that is. I suppose it's just an aspect of my personality or something, but I don't know. I think that, as I was growing up and learning music and playing music in bands and stuff, that was always a goal, is to try to have things be as tight as possible. And if you're listening back to something, or even while you were playing it, you heard something that sounded like it was off, well, let's do that again. That was, that was at least a part of. I wasn't always like that. There's times when I, let's just say I wasn't as structured or something. But it was that was an aspect of it. Always trying to get things to be as tight as possible. So in any case, when I hear this, I don't know. I like the sound of that, even though it is very gritty, very much locked into the grid. And maybe in all honesty, the guitar, I'm sure, is not. I could look at it to some degree. Being that it is such a distorted sound, there's not a lot of peaks and valleys in the waveform, which is a way you can often tell with recorded audio, how in time it is, because you can see like in areas like this right here, where there's it's smaller there and then it's bigger there. You could like click there, and if I really stretch this out, and it's kind of hard to tell at times because of the way these waveforms are. Obviously the peak of this waveform is right about here. But that doesn't mean that's technically where that sound, whatever it is, that chord started. It could have started right on the beat, which is right there where that line is, even though it's smaller there. Or it could be that is the initial attack of it, which is often the case, actually, where you see the largest part of the waveform. So it's possible that, let's just say it's possible, and maybe even likely, that I was off. And this is at 64th note resolution, which is pretty high. That means that each click of this line, if you can see it, is a 64th note. Each time it moves there, it's moving in 64th note increments. So if it's off about a 64th note, roughly. From that line to where you see the peak, the highest part of this waveform, which is called a transient. That is literally like a 64th note. So I could have been a 64th note behind there. So what I'm trying to say is that even though that these drums are very much on the grid, basically exactly on the grid, my guitar part is not. I'm sure there's variations in there where I'm not coming in right on the beat. So that adds a certain, I would think it adds a certain looseness to it, a more humanized feel, and that's I guess that's really the way I've always thought of it, is that in doing this process on the computer, is that the fact of the matter is I don't have a drum set, and even if I did, I would really struggle to play these things, and it would be vastly time consuming, because I can hear these things in my head, like drum beats and stuff, and I can write them in terms of using the piano roll as I showed in my previous video, and just writing in notes. I can write parts that way, but if I were trying to play them on an actual drum set, that would be, I just have not developed that skill, and I'm sure I could to some degree. Nowhere probably, I don't know. To think that I could do it like the parts I write, that I don't know. That might be might be a bridge too far, or it would take a long time. Let's put it that way. So, in any case, long roundabout way of saying that I've always thought of it that because I'm using these, and these are actual recorded drum sounds that were played by a real drummer. So it's not quite like a drum machine, where the old drum machines that weren't even actual, for the most part anyway, if not entirely, weren't even actual drum sounds. They were some kind of synthesized sound, like 808s and things. I think they actually did use some cymbals, maybe, in 808s, or 909s. I think maybe they did. I think I heard that somewhere. They they may have actually used a real cymbal sound or something. But in any case, and samples have been around for a long time now. I don't know, 30 years maybe, something like that. They've been around for quite a while. But any case, I've always thought of it as, I want to put as many things, let's put real in quotation marks, things as I can into my music, so that it does have some element of humanness to it, and it's not just, although I like synthetic music too. I like completely, electronic music too, which, is all synthetic a lot of the time. I like that too, but most often, I'll do guitar, bass, some kind of keyboard part maybe that I'm actually playing, and vocals, and I always hope that that it has some element of that humanness. I guess I think of that as two different distinct things. When it's electronic music, I don't really care if it sounds robotic. That's almost kind of the point of it, I suppose, in a way, in my mind. Again, totally subjective. It's art. You can think of it any way you want to, but it's not so much even that I think of it as robotic. I think as that I don't care so much that you're dealing with all electronic things usually. Although sometimes I'll I mix the genres. I'll put guitar parts in with electronic stuff, and but when I'm doing like rock music and stuff like this song, I'm often trying to think of, I want it to sound human. I don't want it to sound robotic. But again, having said that, I suppose I'm kind of contradicting myself in that I liked this beat when it was more quantized. When it was quantized and not, it sounded a little too loose and kind of, I don't know. And that could be more the fault of the software or just the setting that I chose. But I just didn't like how the drums sounded when I added that looseness to it. Anyway, bit of rambling here, and I think I'm going to stop at this point. I think I've gone on for a little over an hour here. And I'm going to stop here for now. And I hope this was enjoyable. If nothing else, it's a record for myself of this recording process. I don't know that people will be hugely interested in this, but it's here if they are. I suppose I'll probably be putting this on YouTube, I guess. And if you did listen and watch, thank you, and I hope you found some enjoyment or information in this. I will see you in the next video.